Hey, Seka!
Yo, what's up, CM Gold?
I'm gonna be building my Lost Vayne Meliodas pretty soon, and I just don't know how to gear him. So should I go for like attack defense, crit damage gear? What should I do? You even listening to me? Seka? Bruh!
The Ivan Boga hasn't said.
Very funny.
Yo, what's going on, guys? Sekapoko here, bringing you another 7 Innocents Grand Cross video. For this, we'll be going over Lost Vayne Meliodas and how to gear him. Essentially, there are multiple different gear sets that people can run, and what I'll be doing, there is different variations of gear sets in situations so you can actually see them and why they would be good in those situations and maybe not in others. So guys, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and go over Lost Vayne Meliodas pretty briefly here so you guys can kind of understand why each gear set would be best for him. So initially on Super Awakening, he has pre-Super Awakening, he has different stats than he has right now. Currently he has about 87% resistance rate, 49% pierce rate, as you can see here. We got about 79% crit chance rate, as well as 198% crit damage rate. He also has good resistance rates for crit defense, as well as some decent lifesteal. Alright, the other thing to note about Lost Vayne Meliodas are his substats. If you go down to his substats here, you can see that he starts out with 70% crit chance and 170 crit damage. He actually gets a lot of the extra crit damage from his kit directly from his Super Awakening. And he also starts with 0% crit resistance, and he gets 15%, unfortunately, from his Super Awakening. I'm not sure why they added that to this, but what are you gonna do? He also has a little bit crit defense that he gets from Super Awakening as well. And you can see pierce rate, not so much. Most of his pierce rate stats and some of his other substats are going to come from his cosmetics, and so does his lifesteal as well as some of his recovery rate. So Seka, I get it. Why are these things important? Well, the way you determine the best gear sets for a character are based on two different things. The first thing that you're going to base it on, oh my gosh, dude, chill with the hell demons. The first thing you're going to base it on is going to be the cards, if the cards have any additional modifiers. So the first thing that you notice about his first card is actually has no additional modifiers, as this card is specifically just going to increase ultimate gauge. The second card is actually going to go through all defensive skills, so this doesn't actually increase any kind of, by any kind of crit damage modifier, nothing. This just goes through defense and just increases ultimate gauge. So they have nothing to do with any type of special modifiers. The next thing we got for Lost Vayne Meliodas is going to be his ultimate ability, which also, of course, does not scale off anything else but the amount of cards you have in your hand. So actually, looking at Lost Vayne Meliodas' cards, he actually would not scale very well off of any type of crit damage modifier. But looking at his actual raw crit damage, the amount of crit chance he has, that's why people consider going with an attack crit damage set, and if it could potentially be the best set for him. Crit damage gear with the reduced amount of defense, you of course are much squishier so that you're much easier to kill. You do want to get crit on Lost Vayne Meliodas a lot, but the fact that he has to take a lot of crits makes it so that you might want to be a little bit more tanky because you are getting crit all the time. So looking at a character like Lost Vayne Meliodas, if you get crit all the time, wouldn't that be bad? Well, if you have high defensive value and you have high crit defense value, you actually get crit for a lot less. So high defense value, meaning so that you're going to take raw reduced damage, and high crit defense would make it so that you would take the least amount of damage. Crit defense is the mechanic that actually reduces all critical damage, but as you can see here, 198% and 85% are very different. So the way this is calculated is you actually take the crit damage value and subtract the crit defense value. So if none of the Lost Vayne Meliodas is hitting me, they're still hitting me for 13% more damage every time they crit, and they crit it like say 80% of the time. So because that's the case, and you're getting crit 80% of the time, 80% of the time you're taking 13% more damage. Now, is that enough? Is that enough reduction? Maybe, maybe not. You can decide on your own if you want to go with a defensive route. Personally, I like to be more defensive on my Lost Vayne Meliodas because I would like to counterplay the other Meliodases that try to full rush me. However, Lost Vayne Meliodas is a high damage unit, and one of the primary reasons, if not the only reason he's on your team, is to do damage. So wouldn't a crit damage set be better than going for a defensive set? The answer is maybe. I've tried both on Lost Vayne Meliodas, and I have tried it in crit damage set in the video link up here, and anytime I push top 100, I'm always using the defensive set. I've used Easton strategies with him with the crit damage set. I've used Easton strategy with him with an attack defense set. To be perfectly honest, there is some difference between the crit damage set and the defense set as far as overall damage, and it is somewhat noticeable, but it's not so noticeable that, you know, I realize it all the time, because I'd rather realize my Lost Vayne Meliodas is alive and not dead. The third option for Lost Vayne Meliodas for a gear set is HP and defense. You'll notice about Lost Vayne Meliodas is that he has 126,000 HP, and if we wanted to compare that to another unit, if I go over to, say, Green Escanor here. Green Escanor with a similar gear set has 127,000 HP, very, very similar. So if you want to, they have a very similar amount of HP. So if that's the case, like Green Escanor or Red Escanor, wouldn't it be better to go with an HP and defense set? Well, the answer for that is kinda. Some people decide to go with an HP and defense set for their Lost Vayne Meliodas, and they are in top 100 PvP. There are some people that do this, and the reason they do it is because they want to win on combat class. And that actually makes a ton of sense for Lost Vayne Meliodas. But as time has gone on, HP and defense versus attack and defense becomes less and less viable. And the reason it becomes less viable are because of two main things. The first thing is PvP rules. And the second thing that it becomes into the mix is going to be awakenings. So with the two differences between four different characters, one of the things that I've noticed about Lost Vayne Meliodas is that an HP and defense Meliodas might not do super great in a lot of situations because of the new Goddess Elizabeth. Now, Goddess Elizabeth is a character that comes out as the next Festival Coin unit, and she has a very, very OP shield. This shield right here is going to make it so that you actually have no increased damage modifiers on all your cards. So if I go back into Lost Vayne Meliodas and look at one of the primary reasons that he does well in fights, is going to be his area effect damage card. This ability has Rush. Now this ability is really strong versus the Elizabeth shield with an attack and defense set, but unfortunately the rush modifier is not added, so you don't ignore enemy defense. You also don't get any extra pierce rate from your Lost Vayne Meliodas, and you get actually no crit chance, which means no crit damage. So no additional modifiers are being added to your actual cards. So the only thing you're actually able to do damage with is going to be your actual raw attack damage. And with Lost Vayne Meliodas, he has a total of 130% damage on his first rank card and 195% damage on the rank 2 card. And because Liz is going to also apply defensive modifiers, resistance value modifiers, etc., she's going to be a lot more tanky than everything else. And her shield is at 150%. So if you're fighting a Liz with the exact same attack value and you have no type advantages or anything like that against the Liz shield will actually block completely block a 1-star Meliodas card. With an HP and defense set, an attack and defense Liz, depending on the week, could actually potentially block a 2-star Meliodas card depending on the situation, which is really, really, really strong. The fact that you could potentially block a 2-star Meliodas card with a 1-star Liz card is a very, very different thing. Now, these are future problems that aren't existing on global right now, but this is just to help you with some of the problems that may come up in the future, to give you an idea of why an attack and defense set is my preference versus HP and defense set. Now, the other thing to notice is that in the future, Lost Vayne Meliodas' crit damage doesn't really matter when you need it. So there are two times when you need Lost Vayne Meliodas crit damage. The first time you're going to need it is when you are doing raw damage toward the enemy, and the second time you're going to need to do damage is in your ultimate. And if you're going to be doing raw damage to the enemy, the interesting thing is crit damage modifiers don't apply toward Liz's shield, so that's not going to help you at all. The defensive value will always be beneficial to you regardless of the situation, unless they have abilities that ignore defense. And there's very few people out there that actually ignore defensive values. I'd say that the amount of enemies that ignore defense is pretty darn low as far as the overall amount. But, you know, there's always Lost Vayne Meliodas who's going to ignore the defense. However, if you do have a Liz shield up, that defensive value is very strong. So my overall recommendation for Lost Vayne Meliodas for most players is, if you're going to be having fun with him, an attack and crit damage set is definitely a fun gear set. It's not the most viable gear set, but it definitely does the most damage. If you go for a triple crit damage set, that could potentially do more damage, but, you know, if you crit. And I don't recommend that at all, because when Liz shields do come out in the future, if you're going for a UR set for Meliodas, that's probably not the best way to go. You're probably going to get clapped. It's definitely fun. It's cool to see big numbers, but is it good? No. As far as the HP and defense set, it is a viable strategy and it does last for a while, but it lasts probably until Liz Shields come around. And once Liz Shield come around, it kind of falls off as well. So they have the same arguments for attack and crit damage versus HP and defense. Both of those sets, I believe, are less effective against Goddess Elizabeth going forward. But if you do want to just build for fun, those are ways to go. If you're looking for like just a base gear set, going with an attack and defense set with just raw gear rolls for attack, defense, and HP is probably my favorite route to go for this character, because it's the safest route, it's the most damage that I can put out, and I always end up getting a lot. I would say that if you are looking to go for if you're looking for future content for PvE, a crit damage modifier set is also not really viable for him. Now, there's been 3 sets of content where Vayne Meliodas has been really viable for PvE content. And if we go into PvE content where he's viable, the first one is going to be the Tower of Challenge. I actually completed the most recent Tower Challenge, which is the most difficult game mode in PvE, with Vayne Meliodas, and I used him on the final stage with an attack and defense set. I did not use an attack and crit damage set. However, attack and crit damage set would actually have been really good for the last stage, but leading up to the last stage, not so much. There's only one stage in the entirety of the place where the crit damage set would have been really, really effective, and that's kind of scary. That's only one stage. The other thing that Vayne Meliodas is really good for is the most recent guild boss. Now, the most recent guild boss, as I went over in previous videos, is going to be a very annoying fight for people who are using single target effects. And apparently... So the most recent guild boss is a very annoying fight. It's actually an area effect damage fight. When you're fighting on the field, you'll notice that you're actually going to be fighting 3 different people. There's going to be... the first thing you're going to fight is going to be the main boss body, which is this thing here. There's going to be a shield on the left-hand side that has a taunt, and then over here is a sword. All 3 of these put together become the guild boss here, and you actually have to fight them. Now, if you kill both of the fodder, which is going to be the sword and the shield, what happens is that the boss will actually get an immunity shield and increase his damage for 1 turn. So you have to end up using an area effect damage card in order to kill all 3 of them at the same time to do the maximum damage. And that because of that, Vayne Meliodas' ultimate is really, really good for this. I've done testing with random shit like Zeldris just for fun to try things out to see which one's better. People have used Derriere in weird ways in order to get that done. So there are a lot of different options for this fight, and you could potentially use many different ones, but Vayne Meliodas is a really cool option that you can use for this guild boss. As far as the other strategies to go, I'd say that this is probably the most efficient because it's good for all 3 modes. Some guild bosses, for some of the guild bosses, Derry's only good for like 1 version, but she's not good for other versions because of the way her cards work and how she works as a unit. But LV will work much more consistently throughout each version. And he actually will work better with an attack and crit damage set for the first 2 variants, and he'll actually do better with a attack and defense set for the 3rd version. And the reason that's the case is because you actually need defense on the fight, and it's really interesting that your defense value actually will matter on the 2nd phase of the fight. It actually is a very, very difficult fight because on the 3rd phase for the 2nd phase for the boss, what happens is you need to defend against all the enemy's mechanics. So if I go to the guild boss here, what will happen is that on the 1st phase, he's going to have the ability to remove all buffs from you, so you just consistently have buffs being removed. And on the 2nd phase, what will happen is that he's actually going to roll back ultimates every time the main boss attacks. It either is going to roll back ultimates by 1 or 3. And because that's the case, what you'll end up doing is using a Goddess Elizabeth shield in order to prevent yourself from losing your ultimate as you're building it back up if you've used it in the 1st phase, which you most likely have. And because that's the case, you're then going to ultimate again on the boss on the 2nd phase and then try to get as much damage as you can. But the issue is that you're going to have to hit every single target on the field and do massive amounts of damage with an ultimate with a character that's trying to constantly lower your ultimate. And if you don't have high defensive values on the 2nd phase, you're going to be in a much more precarious situation than if you have crit damage gear. What happens is the Liz shield will actually break, and if it's not broken, you will actually get to keep your ultimate gauge, but if it breaks the shield, of course, you'll lose your ultimate gauge. For other PvE content, again, if we're going to go to the HP and defense route, or the HP and critical damage route, or whatever you want to go there, there's really no reason to go with an HP and defense set for PvE content. It doesn't help you, especially with the increased defense modifiers that a lot of enemies do have later on in fights. I actually get patience fully on go-throughs sometimes when go-through uses an attack cell, even at maximum stacks, so they give you the scale of actually exactly how strong it is. Lost Vayne Meliodas is one of the few characters that actually consistently does damage, so he's really good for two of the 3 tower fights, which is really good. But overall, there are some major hiccups with any route you want to go. I'd say that the most consistent for me personally is attack and defense. My name is Sekapoko. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was a lot longer than I thought. I did not expect to have a very long video on Lost Vayne Meliodas equipment. I didn't realize it was such an in-depth topic, so my bad. Did not realize there was that much to talk about. But thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. It goes like, subscribe, all the fun stuff, and you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.